Alright, this is the second of 4 articles I'm going to respond to from this Mr. Dark guy. John Chambers and the Patterson-Gimlin hoax solved. There are many in the Bigfoot community who claim that the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film is real. Well, yes, it's a real film. It is a film, yes. What's in the film is what the subject of debate is, not whether it's a film or not. They failed to question the events which led up to the film in question. I wrote another article a few weeks back which illustrated my theory that John Chambers did in fact build the suit. That is rumor and hearsay. I don't go by rumor and hearsay. We don't know for an actual fact that John Chambers built a suit for anybody. It is very evident that the same pat and hair techniques used by the very crew can be seen in the Patterson-Gimlin film, as well as their work in Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Star Trek, etc. The film is definitely a fake, regardless of what crackpots like Bill Munn's claim. Oh, really? Really? Oh. Well, you just by you saying it's a hoax doesn't make it true. The fact of the matter is they have taken many liberties with the film itself and made many assumptions of their own. I know without a doubt that John Chambers and his FX crew are in fact responsible for the suit. And how do you know this, Mr. Dark? Pray tell, what inside information do you have that says, yes, John Chambers built that suit. Yes, the FX crew built that suit. You know, I tell you what, if you can dig up some photographs, of John Chambers actually building this suit, showing it off, before the Patterson-Gimlin film was taken, then I might believe you. Otherwise, you're just blowing smoke. The Bigfooter theories that no man can walk that way are completely false. However, I was looking in the wrong place to solve the film just as everyone else has been all this time. It's not just Bigfooter theories, by the way. Are you going to call Dmitry Donskoy a Bigfooter? He was a biomechanics expert who was trying to get the Olympic athletes ready for the 72 games. He had nothing to do with Bigfoot. I mean, Jurgen Konsak, who is also not a Bigfooter, are you going to say that he is a Bigfooter as well? I mean, forget about Meldrum and forget about Bindernagel and Bill Muntz and all that. Let's talk about outsiders who are not involved in Bigfoot. I just named 2 examples who looked at the Patterson-Gimlin film and said that was not a human-like walk, that no human can walk that way. So try again. Roger Patterson rented the camera he used to make the infamous Patterson-Gimlin film on May 13th, 1967. It was a 2-day rental that he kept until shortly after October 20th, 1967, when he filmed the infamous alleged creature at Bluff Creek. Now, I'm going to point out something that has been overlooked all these years. I also want to point out that using the convenient excuses and lies told by the parties perpetrating the hoax and trying to cover up their gaffes is very foolish indeed. They are liars, so we don't listen to their excuses. In the very first scene of the entire film, we see some B-roll footage they were shooting for their Bigfoot film. Yes, they were out there with the purpose of making a Bigfoot film, which should automatically raise suspicion. In the first scene, we see Roger Patterson come over a hill on his horse. In the same scene, without any cut or break point, we see another gentleman following right behind Patterson. I'm assuming this is the alleged third person, or it may be Gimlin. Now, when we look at this, the camera moves and zooms before a breakaway transition cut on the film. Only one problem. That's the film that was shot in Yakima, not at Bluff Creek. As I mentioned in my last video, even Bob Hieronymus, Greg Long, and Cal Korff will tell you that film was shot in Yakima. They do not dispute that. They will not contradict what we already know, that that film was shot near Yakima. I mean, yes, the terrain may look similar, but it's not Bluff Creek. What this means is that there had to be 3 people there at the time of filming, because Roger coming over the hill is 1 person. The person following him is 2 people. The person operating the camera is the 3rd person. Without a single doubt, there has to be 3 people there. Yes, at Yakima, 6 months before the film was shot, in California. Now, Bigfoot proponents of this film will say things like, well, it is explained that someone was helping them a few days before, and that's why there were 3 people. They went out 2 times, etc. I call foul on this, and I will tell you why. The overwhelming evidence for the creature itself is that it is a hoax made by Chambers and his FX team. Again, you have no proof of that. This is what the real world says, not what the Bigfoot supporters that claim everything everywhere is a Bigfoot say. Well, again, no. See, you don't get it. You just don't get it. You know, their main supporter, Bill Munn, is an FX artist himself, or was at one point. He is credited with 5 films, and none of his films have very good FX work, in all honesty. I don't know about that. He is in direct opposition to the words of Rick Baker, John Landis, and other award-winning entertainment industry professionals who have worked on things such as American Werewolf in London, Gorillas in the Mist, Star Wars, etc., with hundreds of credits between them. The overwhelming majority, in fact all of them, say it's a guy in a suit, and it makes sense that it would have been John Chambers who did it, because he was the only game in town in those days. Well, as Bill Munns has explained, and I personally think it's a very reasonable explanation, all of the special effects artists and creature makeup suit artists and all that who said the PG film was a hoax, they had to be able to figure out how something was done, or at least they had to act like they knew how it was done. And if they didn't know, they didn't get any more special effects jobs. So they had to go by the party line. They had to toe the party line and say, well, I know how that was done. I was never fooled for a second. I know every time how that was done. So they had to say that, or otherwise they don't get any more. They don't get any more jobs working on special effects or creature effects or whatever. So I mean, this line of thinking is BS, really. And John Chambers vehemently denied to Bobby Short, R.I.P., that he had anything to do with creating a suit for that film. Now, with that said, I pointed out that Roger Patterson rented the camera in May of '67, ahead until, I believe, December of '67, when the arrest warrant was issued for his theft of the camera. Yeah, I mean, that did happen. It's true. That part is actually true. This means that he had the access to that camera for 6 to 7 months, at least 5 to 6 months prior to filming the alleged creature. They claim that they only went out 2 times or so and were helped once, but not at the time they shot the film of the creature. Yeah, and I think it's a Mr. and Mrs. Cook who live in Willow Creek. But no, there was a couple, I believe Mr. and Mrs. Cook, John Kirk mentioned them recently on MNBRT radio, who were on a ridge watching over Bluff Creek the day that the film was taken. And they only saw 2 people. They only saw Patterson and Gimlin. They did not see anybody else. I do not believe this to be the case at all, and I do not see how anyone else could either, because that would imply that Patterson rented the camera in May and sat on it without using it until October. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Instead, what happened is Patterson rented the camera in May, planning the hoax. Oh, really? They had to have taken their time getting everything right for the hoax, and who knows how many rolls of film they went through and how many times the person in the suit walked across that sandbar, and probably even experimented in other locations too. They probably took that long to get everything right and finally got the right piece of footage that they felt could fool everyone the best. Now, I doubt they went out every day, but I'm sure it took a while to get everything just right, and with the help of Ray Wallace, I'm sure they nailed it. Again, do you have any proof that Ray Wallace helped Roger Patterson with anything? Do you have any absolute concrete proof? Not hearsay, not conjecture, not wild conspiracy theories? I didn't think so. The tracks Roger Patterson is holding up look so much like the Wallace tracks that it is quite obvious he molded his set of fake feet after the ones Wallace had. Again, and I pointed out in the last video, you have to be either half crazy, half blind, or half drunk to even think that they're the same. However, the fact that three people can be seen clearly, and this is something that is absolute and cannot be disputed because those cameras require manual filming, etc. There were definitely at least three people involved in the whole thing, and to believe the stories that the third person was only there at a certain time and not another is pretty unlikely given the circumstances and results. Again, that film, or that pareidolia, which supposedly shows Bob Gimlin standing in the bushes, again, you can look at clouds, you can pick out faces. That's not proof of anything. Roger Patterson was a con man, a liar, as well as a thief. You've been reading Greg Long's book, haven't you? He had the camera for at least 5 to 6 months prior. He even had an arrest warrant issued for allegedly stealing the camera. So that right there tells us all we need to know. Well, it doesn't matter about the character of the individual, of the photographer. Renee DeHenden said it best. Adolf Hitler could have taken that film. A pedophile could have taken that film. Well, he said child molester, but you get the point. What is important is not the character of the filmmaker. What's important is what's on the film. It doesn't even matter how the suit was done because we have exposed the lie that only 2 people were there, and the even greater lie that they only went out a few times. That is complete fabrications and purposeful deceit carried out by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin. Again, provide some evidence. Citation needed. The film is a hoax because Bigfoot is fake, yes, but the film is also fake because Patterson and Gimlin are liars, and the first scene of the entire film shows us that, something that has been missed for 50 years. It took a guy that has worked in film to see it and say, hey, wait a second. The Patterson-Gimlin film is a lie. Let's even discuss the Hollywood discussion on the subject. Well, Hollywood, again, as I pointed out, they had to act like they knew how something was done, even if they didn't know. Otherwise, they wouldn't get that next job, and otherwise, they might not, be in contention for an Oscar for special effects. All right, what I'm about to read is from an article which was written by Mark Travinsky for Strange Magazine in 1996. The Makeup Man and the Monster, John Chambers in the Patterson Bigfoot Suit. An investigation by Mark Travinsky. The Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film was arguably the most famous real or strange phenomenon-related film ever shot. It has been featured in numerous television shows and films and ads, on the cover of books and magazines, now on websites. The Patterson-Gimlin film has been one of the major pillars of belief in Bigfoot for the past, at that time, 28 years. When people think of Bigfoot, the creature in the film often comes to mind. Many have supported the film, some have criticized it, but generally the Patterson-Gimlin film is spoken in reverential tones by Bigfoot aficionados. There are long-standing rumors of a man in the suit in the Patterson-Gimlin film, but no investigator has ever tried to seriously investigate the rumors, until now. John Chambers lost in space in the Patterson suit. The rumor. The Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot suit appeared in some form in an episode of the 1960s television series Lost in Space. The source, John Vulick, Hollywood makeup artist on the internet. In 1995, John Vulick, head of Optic Nerve Makeup Studio, posted a message to an internet news group in which he wrote that the suit used in the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot film was supposedly modified from one used in a Lost in Space episode. In this episode, the rumor goes, a hairy alien took vegetables from the Robinsons' space garden. Buick recalls, I was watching a Lost in Space episode, and as a makeup artist, it looked like the Patterson suit with a different head. There's one scene where you see it from behind. Just from seeing it, it looked like the exact same suit to me. If the suit in that episode is not the same suit, then it is done in a similar style and probably by the same person. There's something about the shape of it, the bulkiness of it, that I think is really similar. For me, this is all just speculation. I have no hard evidence. Well, there you go. If you have no hard evidence, don't say anything about it. But as a makeup artist, in my eyes, it looks like the same suit, and I knew that Lost in Space and the Patterson Gimlin film were around the same time. Other makeup artists have also expressed this opinion. Is it possible that a version of the Patterson Bigfoot suit was on Lost in Space? According to Taylor and Roy in Making a Monster, Lost in Space was indeed one of the shows that John Chambers worked on. Chambers also did some episodes for The Outer Limits, Lost in Space, and Night Gallery. Many of these television programs had to exist on low budgets, despite high ratings and the need for creative staff. Chambers would turn out 2 or 3 monsters a week, page 202. Longtime Chambers associate Mike McCracken Sr. confirms that Chambers worked on Lost in Space, recalling, John was in the 20th Century Fox makeup department at that time, and he did some things for that show. It was a Fox show. For expert opinion and fact concerning Lost in Space, I turned to Flint Mitchell, a Strange magazine reader and the head of a Lost in Space fan club. Flint had a good deal to say about Chambers' work on Lost in Space. John Chambers was never credited on the show, to my knowledge. I know that one of his makeup creations was certainly used on Lost in Space. An experimental ape mask complaining of the apes was used for a creature named Creech in the episode Fugitives in Space, air date January 31st, 1968. What did Flint Mitchell think of the notion that the Patterson suit may have been modified from a Lost in Space costume? As for the idea of the monster costumes being modified to look like the Bigfoot footage, that is entirely possible. They modified costumes on Lost in Space all the time. That's how producer Irwin Allen worked. He never paid for something new when it could be altered and reused. About the only part of the Bigfoot costume that was unique was the head. So it's possible that one of the Lost in Space costumes could have been used with a new head or an altered head from the show. Having determined that Chambers worked on Lost in Space, although uncredited, and that costume modification was a common practice at that time, I wanted to find out which Lost in Space episode included a hairy monster in the vegetable garden. Again, Flint Mitchell came to my aid. The episode you want, A Hairy Beast Attacks the Robinsons' Garden, is from the Space Croppers. Actually, the beast was a werewolf, and he was in human form when he stole from their garden. Mitchell emailed me. Space Croppers first aired on March 30th, 1966, and was the 6th show of the second year of Lost in Space. Lost in Space, Episode Guide, SF Lovers Archives, Rutgers University. Strange Magazine subscriber Tim Johnson also offered his help on the investigation. He suggested that I check out the Lost in Space episode, One of Our Dogs is Missing. Air dates December 8th, 1965 and August 24th, 1966, in which a giant hairy mutant attacks Judy. If not that one, then surely you'll find hairy monsters aplenty in the following episode, which recycles practically every monster costume used in Lost in Space, Johnson emailed. This is the Rosetta Stone of Lost in Space monster appearances, The Keeper. Air dates, Part 1, January 12, 1966, Part 2, January 19, 1966. The episode All That Glitters was also suggested for its monster scenes. Above and beyond the Call of Duty, Flint Mitchell went through his collection of Lost in Space videos and dubbed virtually every sequence from each episode involving a hairy monster. In the episode One of Our Dogs is Missing, the suit is much baggier than the Patterson suit, although the hair texture is similar. In The Keeper, the creature goes by quickly and is vaguely similar to the monster in One of Our Dogs is Missing. The suits in the Magic Mirror and the Oasis do not appear to resemble the Patterson suit very closely. Space Croppers, the episode that makeup expert John Buick believes may include a version of the Patterson suit, is somewhat compelling. While the arms look fabric-like, the suit is a possibility for modification. The bagginess is evident again in All That Glitters and Space Circus. The episodes Prisoners of Space, Revolt of the Androids, and Hunter's Moon also include monster suits that may have been modified but are not particularly compelling. I screened the footage with film person slash Strange Magazine executive editor Douglas Chapman, and effects slash film slash photography person, Strange Magazine art director Greg Snook. Doug Chapman's reaction interesting. I could see how some of the suits could have been used in the Patterson Gimlin film if work was done on them. Well, first of all, you should say the alleged suit. We don't know for sure. We don't know it was a suit. Matter of fact, I don't think it was a suit. Well, then again, Travinsky's dead, so we can't exactly challenge him and say, no, you're supposed to say alleged suit. Greg Snook found the footage interesting but found it inconclusive, pointing out that we never see any of the monsters in the same pose as the PG film, making it very hard to compare the creatures. I agree with Doug and Greg. One cannot reach a conclusion based on these scenes alone. From screening these sequences, however, we get some additional insight into what to look for when viewing the PG film. By comparing so many monster suits, we were able to get a good feeling for the look of the hair, the general construction, and the weak points of the suits. In an interview with this investigator, makeup master Tom Berman discussed credit for the Lost in Space monsters. Yes, after Planet of the Apes, and we did some Lost in Space things even in '67. Yes, we did do a number of things for Lost in Space. Most of that stuff that was done for Lost in Space during that period I did. John didn't really want to be bothered with the stuff on the show, so I did most of the manufacturing of most of the silly creatures. Janusz Prohaska used to bring some of the creature things. He and a guy named Bill Wada would make the different faces for it. He could be an ape or a werewolf or whatever he wanted to be, all in the same silly suit. So Berman and Prohaska, who later died in a tragic plane accident, may have been responsible for the Lost in Space monsters, not Chambers. Tentative conclusion, we somehow doubt the Lost in Space suit was used in the PG film, but it is not impossible that this was the case. We have not heard the last of this. Bigfoot aficionados have long held that, according to special effects experts, the creature in the PG film could not have been a man in a suit. On the contrary, many special makeup effects artists believe that the PG film depicts a costumed person. Well, again, and I will explain this again, it's because if they don't have an answer for how something is done, or at least they can BS their way through an answer, they don't get that next job. So they have to toe the party line, or otherwise, they're not going. They're going to be unemployed, basically. In fact, for years, it has been generally known in the Hollywood special effects makeup community that Academy Award-winning makeup artist John Chambers fabricated the suit in the PG film. In 1967, Chambers created the makeup for Planet of the Apes, which was released in 1968. The PG film was allegedly shot October 20th, 1967. Whether Chambers created the suit or not, it is highly significant that so many makeup artists believe the film to be a hoax, and this fact will come as a shock to many Bigfoot researchers. Well, again, they're all, Bill Mullins is essentially, it's him against the world, you might say. I don't know how many times I can point out that these guys have to toe the party line. All of these makeup artists. They can believe the film to be a hoax all they want. It doesn't make it true. As the first investigator to look into the allegations concerning Chambers, I have interviewed a number of the top makeup people in Hollywood, many of whom are quoted herein. Considering how many makeup people in Hollywood believe that John Chambers made the suit, it is amazing that it took this long for the case to come to our attention. I first heard the rumor that John Chambers made the Patterson suit from anthropologist / cryptozoologist and Strange Magazine reader Alex Downs in 1992. Alex was working at the Smithsonian Institution for the summer, and we spoke on several occasions. Alex told me that he had heard about Chambers making the suit from author / producer Don Blunt. I was intrigued that Chambers' name had been connected with the Patterson suit. After all, there had been rumors of a suit, but to the best of my knowledge, a name had never been attached to them in print. Bigfoot author John Green noted that there were rumors of a man in a suit, but they amounted to nothing. There were only rumors because Green wanted them to be. He could have identified his source so that other researchers could have checked for themselves. Being involved in a number of investigations, I filed this tantalizing information about the Chambers-Patterson connection and set out to learn everything that I could about the PG film. Between 1992 and 1995, I spent a good deal of my time investigating Ray Wallace and the Birth of Bigfoot case, and the connections to the Patterson case were many and obvious. In fact, the more I learned about the film, the more problems I had with the case. I would rather not deal with the Patterson case as a whole at this time, however, preferring in this article to focus on the attitudes of the experts who really count, the special effects makeup artists of Hollywood. My goal to track down the rumor that John Chambers made the suit, and while doing so, to learn what makeup artists thought about the film. I would attempt to investigate the case from the outside in, peeling back the layers of the onion. I did this for several reasons. It was very possible that Chambers would not admit that he made the suit, even if he had fabricated it. Also, I had never approached the case in this fashion before and wanted to give it a try. Dave Kinlan and the Rick Baker revelation. I next heard about Chambers making the Patterson Bigfoot suit in 1995 from effects makeup artist Dave Kinlan. Dave was working with his wife Colleen on an animatronic cat for Disney's remake of That Darn Cat at the time. Dave had first learned of Chambers' alleged involvement in the fabrication of the Patterson suit from his friend, makeup artist Howard Berger in 1983 or 1984. Kinlan and Berger, now head of K&B Effects Group, were roommates at the time. Berger came home one day from working on Harry and Henderson's at Rick Baker's studio and said to Dave that Rick Baker told him and some other crew members that John Chambers made the Patterson Gimlin film suit. Academy Award-winning Hollywood makeup effects Rick Baker is the makeup master who created the apes in King Kong 1976 remake, Ray Stoke, and Gorillas in the Mist. He has certainly designed more ape suits than any other makeup artist. If anyone is qualified to discuss ape/Bigfoot suits, it is he. In addition, Baker has studied ape movements in zoos all over the United States. Dave Kinlan was himself a member of Rick Baker's makeup team in 1987 when he heard about the Chambers/Patterson Gimlin film connection directly from Baker. Kinlan recalls, I heard this again while working on Gorillas in the Mist at Rick Baker's studio. Excuse me. We had just pulled out the old Harry and the Henderson's radio-controlled head and were talking about real Bigfoot sightings, quote-unquote. I mentioned the PG film, and Rick responded, you know that's a guy in a suit. John Chambers built that around the time of Planet of the Apes. It was common knowledge in the shop from around the time they were building the Harry suits for Harry and the Hendersons. In a later conversation with this author, Dave Kinlan explained that he got the impression that Rick Baker had heard the information directly from John Chambers. Rick told us very matter-of-factly, Kinlan recalls. It was not the kind of story that he would go out of his way to make up. Howard Berger, an earlier account. I gotta try and scroll it up. Here we are. My next step was to interview Howard Berger, chief of Hollywood makeup effects studio K&B Effects Group, Eraser, From Dusk Till Dawn, Dances with Wolves, from whom Dave Kinlan had first heard the Chambers rumor. Berger here remembers hearing about the Chambers-Patterson suit connection in 1985. I always thought that it was kind of fake looking, and I remember seeing the Sun Classic Pictures movie In Search of Bigfoot or whatever, and they were saying there was no way this could ever be a man. I'm thinking, what a bunch of crap. Of course it could be a man. I was working at Rick Baker's on Harry and the Hendersons, and we were talking about Bigfoot and talking about that footage, and Rick Baker told us that John Chambers had done that suit, and then it was just a crappy walk-around suit he built. It was like a gag to be played on the guy who shot it. The guy never knew it was a hoax, and his friends played on him. That's what I had heard. That's what Rick Baker said. That he knew it was a John Chambers suit. It was just a big joke. But when it started becoming popular, nobody wanted to come forward and say it's just a joke. It's not real. I don't remember if Rick said that he saw the suit, but I do remember Rick telling us about it. I asked Howard if he had any idea how Baker would have known about Chambers making the Patterson suit. You probably heard it from John Chambers. That's what I figure, he replied, laughing. Rick Baker's role. Rick Baker had publicly criticized the PG film in the past, but before this investigation it was not known outside of the Hollywood makeup community that he ever connected Chambers to the film. Baker has known Chambers for some 25 years. Baker's 1971 theatrical feature film debut, age 20, was as the designer/fabricator of the title creature for Schlock, a low-budget monster comedy written and directed by 21-year-old John Landis. Animal House, trading places, etc. The creature, dubbed the Schlockopus, was a sophisticated 8-man suit worn by Landis. Landis had makeup master John Chambers perform a small role in Schlock as National Guard captain. Chambers and Baker met on the set, and later Chambers praised Baker's work on the film, predicting that Rick should be one of the leading makeup artists of the future. Al Taylor and Sue Roy, Making a Monster, New York Crown Publishers, Incorporated, 1980, page 250. In 1992, on the television show Now It Can Be Told, Baker suggested to host Geraldo Rivera that the creature looked like cheap fake fur. Daniel Perez, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek, Bigfoot Times, October 20th, 1992, page 21. It is possible that Chambers could have told Baker about his involvement in the Patterson suit at some point, and that Baker later told his own tight-knit crews, but my understanding is that Baker and Chambers were not great friends. I contacted Rick Baker to try to determine how he knew about the Chambers fabrication of the Patterson Bigfoot suit. A short list of questions was submitted to Baker, who is currently working in New York on the film Men in Black for Steven Spielberg. Baker formally declined to be interviewed or to respond to my questions, citing lack of time. This was disappointing since it was possible that Baker might have been the source of the belief that Chambers made the Patterson suit. Nevertheless, it is highly significant that Baker believed the film to be a fake. He, if anyone, would know. There's nothing significant about that. He has to make sure that he has enough money to put food on his family's table. He has to make sure that he makes money. You don't make money if you don't have a job in the special effects industry. Bob Burns, Patterson Bigfoot, a guy in a suit. Throughout my investigation, many makeup artists suggested that I speak to ape impersonator Bob Burns, who knows what there is to know about the history of the ape suit in Hollywood. I interviewed Bob and was intrigued to learn that he had spent some time with Rick Baker analyzing the film from their particular perspectives. Rick Baker and I looked at that film years ago, and our feeling was it was a guy in a suit. It was quite a few years ago now. Some guy up north sent copies down to us. I don't even remember who the guy was now. But he knew that Rick and I did gorillas and stuff, and he thought that we could help. I heard a rumor once that John Chambers might have built that suit. That is what we heard later on, that John had actually built that. I never heard him say he did, but that is what Rick and I heard a few years later. I don't remember where we heard that now. It was so long ago, probably 15, 16, 18 years ago. I was still working at CBS at the time. I told Bob that everyone I interviewed heard the Chambers information from Rick or from someone else who heard it from Rick. I don't remember where I heard it from, he answered, but I didn't hear it from Rick at all. As a matter of fact, it is generally known in the special effects business here that it's kind of common knowledge that the PG film footage was faked by John Chambers. Bob has some interesting technical thoughts about the PG film, resulting from his repeated viewing of it and subsequent discussion with Baker. I worked at CBS and we took the film up there. I put it on my Moviola and we went back and forth with it and went frame by frame. We gave it a really good and honest shot. We really did. We projected it over and over in our honest opinion from having worked in gorilla suits that it was a guy in a suit. The way it moved, especially, it obviously looked like it had what we call a water bag in the stomach area, which is an old trick that Charlie Gamora, the greatest ape man ever, I think, devised for his suit back in the 30s. That's the sort of liquid stomach thing to make it look like real flesh when you wiggle around. Of course, John would have known about the water bag because he knew Charlie Gamora. I certainly consider Gamora, and so does Rick, the best gorilla man ever. His suits were the best. John Chambers had to know him because he finished his career over at Paramount as the head of their makeup department. I asked Bob one more time if he can remember who told him that Chambers made the suit. I'm racking my brains trying to remember who told me that they thought it was John Chambers, but I honestly can't remember who that would be, he replied. But it did not come from Rick Baker. The film was sent to me, I called Rick in on the thing, and we looked at it together. But Rick never told me it was John Chambers. I found out from somebody else. Rick, as I said, was not a river spreader at all. John Village and the Lost in Space connection. John Village, or is it Village? Maybe I've been mispronouncing his last name. I think he's recently passed away too. He is the Emmy Award-winning owner of Optic Nerve Makeup Studio in Sun Valley, California, and is responsible for the extensive special makeup effects work on the television series Babylon 5. He mentioned the Chambers-Patterson connection online on the Usenet group in 1995 has gone on record with the rumor that the Patterson suit was a modified version of a hairy monster created by John Chambers. In addition, he speculated that the suit might have been created for the 1960s TV series Lost in Space. Since then, his notion has achieved its own life online. It is the fact that Chambers worked uncredited on Lost in Space, making monster suits, and that these suits were often modified. So this contention is not unreasonable. In addition, the sequence of events is logical, and the timeline appears to corroborate the rumors and speculation. In an interview with me, Chambers' ex-partner Tom Byrne claims to have made most of the suits for Lost in Space, however. For more info on Chambers, Lost in Space, and the Patterson suit, check out the first sidebar in the upper right, in which I look further into the Lost in Space rumor. Vilick recalls hearing from a number of people over the years that Chambers made the Patterson suit. These included effects artist Bart Nixon around 1988 and makeup artist Jim McPherson in 1992. I have heard that Chambers made the Patterson suit from at least 2 or 3 different people. Common sense, the footage looks like a suit. Looking at the stuff that Chambers did, the style and all that, and then having seen the stuff on Lost in Space and just knowing that in that era, he was pretty much the only game in town, it makes sense. It falls into place. Jim McPherson had heard that Chambers had built that suit and that Chambers himself might not have even known what the suit was built for. I think that Patterson maybe had just called him up and wanted to rent some kind of suit, because at the time he and Dick Smith were the best guys doing that kind of stuff. And he was more of an effects type guy than Dick Smith. Dick Smith was more of a makeup guy, while Chambers was building suits and creatures and was pretty much the only game in town in the 60s. Bielik has an opinion as to how Patterson could have afforded to have put his hoax together without the funds to have a suit fabricated. Patterson could not have afforded to have it scratch built. I can't imagine that someone like Patterson would have whatever a suit like that would have cost back then. I'm sure it would have been at least in the tens of thousands. He could have rented it though. He probably called Chambers to rent a suit. I get calls from people all the time who want to rent something from me. I could see someone like Chambers renting it for someone for $1,000 or something, maybe redoing it some and taking the head off another thing. That was my guess just seeing it. John Vilick puts little credence in the long-held belief among Bigfooters that makeup artists have proclaimed the Patterson Bigfoot is impossible to duplicate. One guy who wrote to me and said, Disney people looked at it and they said that it couldn't be duplicated. Well, Disney was never known for doing prosthetic effects. I'll tell you, as a makeup artist looking at it, it's a guy in a suit. There's no doubt in my mind that it's a guy in a suit. They get into specifics like the way the head turns, then it turns like a gorilla. It turns that way because the suit was stiff and was made from polyfoam, and he couldn't probably turn his head very well. Well, if it's stiff, then how can it be walking? Well, not every part of it is going to be stiff, the joints are going to be loose, etc. I think it was a guy in a suit. The bottom line for Bulick is a combination of my gut instinct, my knowledge of makeup, and all that I have heard that makes me think that Chambers made the Patterson suit. I do not have proof, but definitely believe that he made it. Well, now, here's the thing: if you don't have proof, then why even spread the rumor? I think it's because these guys wanted to believe that John Chambers might have made that suit. Corroboration? The first time I spoke to Matt Croteau, he was sculpting the nose for a bear in a Duracell commercial. A makeup sculptor and strange magazine reader, Matt contacted me independently to let me know that he had heard from reputable sources that friends and relatives of Chambers knew that he worked on the Patterson suit. This information originated from a source very close to John Chambers. Croteau's sources have chosen to remain nameless, but I know who they are. I think that Matt would have preferred not being named himself, but he had the nerve to never insist on this. Matt is in good company, however, joining Tom Berman, the McCrackens, Rick Baker, Howard Berger, Dave Kinlan, John Bulick, and others who have provided information so that I might get to the bottom of this case, despite the legendary secrecy of the Hollywood makeup community. Chambers and the Burbank Bigfoot. If Chambers made the Patterson suit, it would not have been the only Bigfoot-related hoax that he was involved in. He was also responsible for the fabrication of an elaborate, phony Bigfoot carcass, and he may have consulted on the creation of the infamous Minnesota Iceman. Thus, he was not averse to being involved in hoaxes and other secretive, non-theatrical projects, as the makeup artists referred to non-movie projects. The Burbank Bigfoot was a 900-pound, 7-foot 4-inch Bigfoot model created by Chambers and his crew in the makeup artist's Burbank garage. According to makeup artists Tom Berman and Werner Kepler, the body was an alginate life casting of the actor Richard Kiel, best known for his role as Jaws in 2 James Bond films. Chambers worked on the face to create an ape-man, quote-unquote, look, and ultimately the whole body was cast in plaster. The plaster body was meticulously painted by Chambers and then covered in 3 pounds of human hair, the hair alone requiring a week of work. Body hairs were placed on the figure a few at a time and blended with various colors to match the patterns found on gorillas, monkeys, and humans. After the hair was set in place, Chambers and his men cut and trimmed it carefully to give the entire hair covering an even natural look. According to an article in Hollywood Studio magazine, Bigfoot born in Burbank, June 1970. Werner Kepler clearly recalls the laborious fabrication process and the way that the huge plaster body was hoisted out of the studio garage by rented crane. Who commissioned the fake Bigfoot? No one is talking, and the only ones in the Hollywood studio, and the only clues are in the Hollywood Studio magazine article. Creature was ordered by a man who specializes in sideshow attractions and wanted something new to haul around the country this summer. The man came to Chambers with a number of magazine articles and clippings purporting to show the mysterious ape-man and asked for a duplicate in plaster. Bigfoot will soon be on its way to the Midwest as a curiosity similar to the famed Cardiff giant of the last century. Except John Chambers makes no claims for the creature other than the fact that it is one of the most impressive studies in plaster he has ever done. The article suggests that if a scientist in the future discovers the ostensibly petrified Burbank Bigfoot, you can bet that John Chambers will be looking down from that big makeup lab in the sky with a grin on his face. As to whether or not Chambers played a part in the Frank Hansen Iceman hoax, all that can be said is that in an article in the July 1970 issue of Saga magazine, Hansen wrote that he had consulted with Chambers concerning the hair implantation on the Iceman, writing, John Chambers, a makeup artist and Academy Award winner from 20th Century Fox, suggested that a small wax studio in Los Angeles could implant the hair according to my specifications. Now, Hansen denies that Chambers played any role at all in the Iceman fabrication. Rather, Hansen, who changes his story like other people change shirts, now insists that he met with Chambers concerning the fabrication of a cryogenic display. Those who have followed the Minnesota Iceman saga over the years may find it interesting that makeup artist Mike McCracken Sr. described to this investigator how he met Hansen when the showman came to Universal Studios to talk to the effects team there about building him a phony crashed saucer, including occupants. Werner Kepler, a close Chambers associate for many years and still a friend of Chambers, is now a makeup artist on the hit NBC show ER. He worked as a mold maker with Chambers when the Burbank Bigfoot was constructed, see sidebar at right, and the Patterson suit would have been fabricated. Werner is very close to Chambers and is one of the only people that Chambers sees on a regular basis. Kepler, who is notoriously tight-lipped, cuts Chambers' hair once a month. When Werner was asked by Mike McCracken Jr. about the Burbank Bigfoot, Kepler discussed the subject openly. When Mike asked about Chambers' connection to the Patterson Bigfoot suit, he answered, I would have to get John's permission to talk about that. If there was nothing to talk about, he would not have needed Chambers' permission. That doesn't mean anything. There may be lots of people who have private discussions with their friends, and they say, "No, don't mention anything about this to somebody else." And their friend can be like, "Okay, I won't say anything to anybody else unless I have your permission." It happens all the time. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing unusual about that. John Chambers, monster maker. The more one knows about John Chambers, the more the rumors/allegations make sense. Chambers was a pioneer in the field of special effects makeup. His work on Planet of the Apes was groundbreaking, and he was an ace monster maker at one point in his career, cranking out 2 or 3 monsters weekly for television. His monsters have appeared in The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Outer Limits, Night Gallery, Pickman's Model, Lost in Space, and other productions for film and television. In fact, Chambers had quite a collection of hair suits. Makeup effects artist Mike McCracken Jr., Twilight Zone the movie, and Congo, remembers visiting Chambers in his house studio shortly before Chambers' retirement. He must have had 20 or 30 different fursuits in his house, McCracken calls. John was a master at making monster suits. He had monster suits I'd never even seen. I was blown away. I could easily see him assembling a Bigfoot suit from the suits there. John Chambers was a natural choice as a fabricator for the Patterson suit and the Burbank Bigfoot, according to Taylor and Roy, authors of Making a Monster. Chambers was the only makeup artist for years to operate a commercial makeup lab. He worked mainly as a lab man, doing makeup creations and appliances for other makeup artists for good fees, but no film credit. Thus, he would not have minded working on a project that he would never receive credit for. When working on a television series, Chambers would have to do sketches in a day or two and create a monster in 10 days or less. He was used to working quickly and on a low budget if necessary. He was great at keeping a secret, working with a very tight crew who shared his tight-lipped attitude. Some makeup artists have opined that Chambers was the only one in Hollywood with the technical expertise to make the Patterson suit in 1967. I interviewed longtime Chambers associate Mike McCracken Sr., comedian, Island of Dr. Moreau, who worked with him from 1972 to 1982, the year Chambers retired. McCracken holds this opinion. People now look at the Patterson Gimlin film and say, this is how it could have been made, but at the time it was made in the late 60s. John was one of the few people who could have made something that looked that good. John was the creator of modern effects makeup. If anyone could pull off the Patterson suit, it was Chambers, who was a great technician. He was a constant innovator, developing a number of special makeup products and processes. Chambers was the first and only makeup artist to win both an Oscar and an Emmy in 1980, was president of the Society of Makeup Artists, and was the first motion picture makeup artist with a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. In addition, Chambers is said to have been a real practical joker, a common attribute of the hoaxer. Chambers' co-worker Mike McCracken Sr. recalls, John had kind of a practical joker attitude. He would like to pull all kinds of practical jokes. Now, keep in mind, all this is just theory and conjecture and rumor. Basically, yes, rumor is the big thing. Tom Berman, the man inside the monster? McCracken felt that I should talk to one other person. Tom Berman would know the truth. McCracken proffered. He apprenticed under John and was involved in a lot of John's private, non-theatrical productions. Tom Berman is one of the top Hollywood makeup artists. His studio, located in North Hollywood, is responsible for makeup effects for such films as Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Waterworld. John Chambers and Tom Berman were close associates at the time the Patterson Gimlin film was made. I contacted Berman, and the following is an excerpt of an interview that I did with him in March 1996. Travinsky. There has been a rumor going around the makeup community for years that John Chambers made the Patterson suit that was filmed in 1967. Tom Berman. No, he didn't make that suit. One, he wouldn't have made a suit that bad, and number two, I knew him during that time, and in 67 we were doing Planet of the Apes, so we would have had no time to do a suit. That was all consuming from January 1st to September 14th, and then he was on tour after that. So he would have never had time to make the suit anyhow. Stravinsky, were you also working with him in the period before that? Tom Berman, yes, since 66. Stravinsky, what is your opinion on the PG film? Tom Berman, I saw that. I remember I was on Walper. We did a Bigfoot story on whether it was real or not, entitled Monsters, Myth, or Legend. We did a makeup on Richard Keel for that. John Chambers and I viewed the PG film individually and determined that somebody made a hokey suit. It was a prank. Stravinsky, do you have any idea who would have been involved in it was a prank? Tom Berman, we always tried to figure it out, but we were never able to figure it out. I don't think that it was professional. I don't think it was done well enough to be made by a professional. It wasn't someone who knew how to perform. So Berman, like every other makeup pro I spoke with, believes that the Patterson Gimlin film is a person in a suit. John Bulick has recently spoken with Berman about his belief that Chambers could not have made the suit due to the lack of time. Bulick suggested to Berman that rather than making the suit, it could have been put together from existing suits, which would have taken little time. Berman entertained the possibility, saying that he didn't think of that, but it might have been possible. Shortly before going to press with this article, I interviewed a prominent makeup artist who prefers to remain anonymous. My informant revealed that in 1995 he learned that Tom Berman was allegedly the person in the PG film suit. After some coaxing and my offer of anonymity, my informant told me that he heard this information from makeup sculptor Greg Smith, who had heard it from Berman himself. I shared this information with Dave Kinlan, who coincidentally is currently working on a makeup project with Greg Smith. Dave put me in touch with Greg, who explained to me that he has indeed heard that Tom Berman was in the PG film suit. But rather than hearing this from Berman, he heard it from makeup artist Jake Garber, who heard it from Berman. I then interviewed Jake Garber, who claimed that while he had worked for Berman for 6 months on the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Berman never said anything about the PG film suit to him. I have not yet had an opportunity to check out the latest lead in the Berman strand of this investigation. Evidently, Tom Berman's daughter-in-law, Jennifer McManus, who is married to his son Rob, matter-of-factly told a fellow makeup artist in that interview that she heard from her husband that his dad and Chambers built the suit. Furthermore, it was supposedly common knowledge in the Berman family that Berman laid the hair on the suit. I will look into this further as my investigation continues. I should also note that the number of makeup artists that I have interviewed have characterized Tom Berman as someone who could possibly lean in the direction of hoaxing. A secretive community. Several makeup artists have asked to remain anonymous after I had conducted a number of on-the-record interviews. I've investigated many phenomena over the past decade, and some of the cases have been quite controversial, but rarely has anyone requested anonymity. Reading through my articles on the more substantial of these investigations, the 1912 mystery Bigfoot photo, the Mary F./Shields Morgar photos, the Crystal Skulls, the Shelbyville Swamp Monster, etc., one would notice that there are few, if any, anonymous recipients or informants. The amount of off-the-record information that I have collected is substantial. I have tried to be fastidious in keeping my agreements with each source. Occasionally, a subject that was brought up in an off-the-record conversation would be raised and discussed by another source on the record. When this has occurred, I have used the information from the on-the-record interview and have not referred to the first off-the-record source. Nothing that was told to me off the record has been used in this article unless it was told to me by another source on the record. I am in the awkward position of knowing more than I can tell at this time. One aspect of either Chambers' career or the legends surrounding it is the buzz about Chambers' involvement in government-sponsored black box work. No one has ever been willing to go on the record concerning this alleged work, but within the Hollywood makeup community it is generally believed that such work did occur and that it has been added to the secretiveness of Chambers and his close associates. The tight-lipped attitude of those in the know has only contributed to the spread of rumors and speculation in the Hollywood makeup community. Widespread rumors in the makeup community depict Chambers applying a wig and prosthetics to a cadaver to fake the death of a foreign ruler and engaging in a number of quote-unquote company-sponsored, quote, non-theatrical projects. These black box rumors are all reminiscent of Mission Impossible plots, many of which relied on disguises, some courtesy of Chambers' makeup prowess. One rumor depicts the CIA watching Mission Impossible on television and getting disguised ideas from it, then going after the makeup artist Chambers to work for them. Actually, Chambers did the makeup on the pilot, while Bob Dawn was responsible for the eye-catching work on most of the series. While there is no proof that Chambers was involved in covert activities, we do know for a fact that Hollywood makeup artists have been instrumental in various military/intelligence reports. In this regard, I interviewed Bob Schiffer, the shaggy dog, the Burman of Alcatraz, the head of Disney's makeup and hair department with over 60 years in the business. The veteran makeup master touched on this sensitive topic. John did mention to me at one time that he was involved in something for the government. Some of us, including myself, were recruited during World War II by then Lieutenant Gordon Bow for undercover work of a certain type. Sometimes we did not know what the makeup was used for. A lot of us did camouflage work in World War II. I was also involved in the years after the war. In the Bay of Pigs invasion, we made up people to look Cuban. For the record, Schiffer opines that the PG film Bigfoot looks like someone in a suit. The makeup community is a secretive group, to be sure, with more than its share of secrets. There is an old adage in Tinseltown: if the makeup artists told what they learned in their chairs, it would bring down Hollywood. I should mention one significant fact about the off-record information, without betraying any confidences. It supports the notion that Chambers created the Patterson suit. The more one knows about this case, the more this theory appears to make sense. If a case is based on rumors and contemporary legends, then generally the further one gets into the investigation, the more the case unravels. In this case, the opposite has been true. A denial from Chambers. Today, John Chambers is in a nursing home in Los Angeles. He has been ill in recent days, and I knew that it would be hard, if not impossible, to speak to him. Nevertheless, I contacted him by fax in care of the home's public affairs person, Vicki Johnson. I explained to Chambers that I was interested in speaking to him about the generally held belief in the Hollywood makeup community that he made the suit depicted in the PG Bigfoot film. Chambers read my fax and responded to me through Mrs. Johnson. Miss Johnson. Mr. Chambers is a very private person, Mark, Vicki Johnson explained to me. Due to his current situation, he regrets that he is not available for interviews. He did reply to your fax by voicemail, though. He said that he did not design the costume. Does this mean that he had nothing to do with the costume, or that he fabricated it and someone else designed it? When asked about the Chambers-Patterson connection, Disney makeup effects veteran Bob Schiffer responded, I don't know if John made the Patterson suit, but I'll tell you one thing. If he did, he wouldn't tell you. It will die with him. Rumors. I did not expect John Chambers to grant me an interview, so I conducted this investigation with the understanding that I would be tracking down rumors. Whenever I investigate a case, I am amazed at how many rumors fly around, but remain uninvestigated. It is as if to brand something a rumor grants it some kind of invincible status, making it somehow uninvestigatable. If Bigfoot author John Green publishes that there were rumors of a guy in a suit in the PG film but that they did not pan out, one has to trust him, to have faith in his judgment. We have no way of knowing what the rumor was or where it came from. By not telling us the content of the rumor, from whom it was heard, or what he did to check out the accuracy of the rumor, we do not have enough information to come to our own conclusions, however tentative. I think that it is important for investigators to think about rumors as they would any other information that they need to check out. Investigators, rather than shunning rumors, should go after them and try to determine if there is any basis for them in fact. Most quote-unquote investigators of strange phenomena appear content to accept rumors as rumors and to go no further. Well, that is because they are only rumors. There's no truth to there's no proof of any of this. I've seen no evidence that anyone other than myself has ever tried to track down these rumors and seriously evaluate them. Why these rumors remain uninvestigated? Because most Bigfoot investigators are driven by belief. Why do they want to investigate a rumor that hurts the case for the existence of Bigfoot? Well, again, whether the PG film shows a real Sasquatch or a hoax, as I've always determined, just because maybe what's in the Patterson Gimlin film might be a guy in a suit, that does not invalidate the entire subject. I've said that numerous times, and I still hold to that. Back to Baker. Interestingly, no one has ever claimed to have heard the rumor from Chambers. Nearly everyone who has heard the rumor either heard it from Rick Baker or from someone who heard it from Baker. In fact, late in my investigation, I spoke with Don Glutt, the person who told Alex Downs the Chambers rumor. Alex, you may recall, was the first person who passed the information on to me. Blunt recalls, I used to be a member of the California Skeptics Society, and they had a lecture on Bigfoot in which they ran the footage. And when they ran it, the guy who ran it, I don't remember who ran it, he claimed that Rick Baker had looked at the footage and totally authenticated it. He said, based on my knowledge of ape suits and things that this could not have possibly been faked. So I then asked Jim McPherson, who worked with Rick, and I said, did you ever hear about Rick Baker substantiating or authenticating this footage? And he said, we know the special effects business here, that's kind of common knowledge that footage was faked by John Chambers. Did Baker start the rumor? Did he hear the information straight from Chambers, as Berger and Kinlan have inferred? I decided that it was worth contacting Rick Baker again. This time I would boil my interview down to one central question. From whom did he hear that Chambers made the Patterson suit? I faxed Baker, asking him this one question and letting him know that a great deal of time and effort had gone into my investigation, mentioning a number of the makeup people that I had interviewed. I was surprised when I received a call from Rick Baker's studio. The ever-cryptic Baker read my fax and had a reply for me, read to me by someone in his studio. He, Rick, no longer believes this is true. What are we to make of this response? That Baker believed it once himself? If he did, what made him change his belief? It did not escape my notice that Baker had still not answered the question of who he heard the information from. Perhaps Baker had started a rumor that took on a life of its own and now doesn't want to deal with it. Or maybe he knew the truth, was not supposed to tell, and is now covering up. Those who know Rick Baker, however, describe him as somewhat quiet, not prone to overstatement and wild claims. Rick is considered a straight shooter and not the kind of person who would create or knowingly spread a rumor. Bob Burns describes him thusly. Rick is not a game player or anything like that. It's not his style. He just doesn't do it. Conclusions. The bottom line, the rumors are fascinating, but at this point in the investigation, there is only hearsay and circumstantial evidence that Chambers had anything to do with the Patterson suit. Exactly. It's all hearsay. It's all circumstantial evidence. It doesn't make it true. It appeared at one point that the original source to the rumor was Rick Baker, who unfortunately did not answer my question of who he had heard the rumor from. Bob Burns, who is Baker's longtime friend, did not hear the rumor from Baker, however, implying that there may have been another source. Burns does not recall who he heard it from, however. The fact that this entire case may be based on a contemporary, aka urban legend, has not been lost on me. A small community has passed a rumor from person to person. The rumor takes on a life of its own, growing and changing. And perhaps most importantly, no one has told me that they heard the story directly from Chambers or Berman. All of the information has been a friend of the friend of a friend sort. Mitigating against the contemporary legend theory is Kepler's reaction to questions about the Patterson suit, that he would need Chambers' permission to discuss the topic. Strong suspicions of numerous makeup artists that Chambers made the suit, Chambers' involvement in other Bigfoot-related hoaxes, his undeniable technical ability, secretive nature, and love of practical joking, and corroborating information from unidentified sources close to Chambers. Chambers certainly had the means to pull it off. Remember Mike McCracken Jr.'s statement that Chambers had 20 or 30 monster suits in his home. I just know that somewhere there's a photo of Chambers in his studio standing next to a guy in the Patterson suit, Mike McCracken Jr. muses. Well, of course, that photo has not surfaced. I found it very interesting that Dave Kinlan, John Bulick, and Mike McCracken Jr., after hearing that Tom Berman believes that Chambers did not make the suit, that Rick Baker claims that he no longer thinks that is true, and that Chambers has denied designing the suit, still believe that Chambers made the Patterson suit. As Dave Kinlan puts it, it's a suit, and if anybody built it at that time, it was Chambers. Add to that Chambers' secretive nature, the matter-of-fact way that Rick Baker told it to me, and Werner's cagey attitude toward the whole thing, it all adds up. I'm convinced he made it. Finale. There's also one last piece of evidence I've discovered and is significant. Well, I will go ahead and tell you the final piece of evidence I figured out. I was saving this. October 20th was a Friday. The film was allegedly sent by plane to Yakima on October 21st, and developed and shown the first time on October 22nd, which is Sunday. It was Kodachrome film, which means that only Kodak could have developed it. This is wrong. The film would have had to go to Palo Alto. They didn't work on weekends, not ever. Kodak Labs did not at any time work overtime or on weekends, so this is an impossible scenario and further proof of the lie. Well, how do we know that Al Diatley didn't pay a studio or pay a film developer like in Seattle to have it developed on the side, where nobody would, kind of under the table, you might say. You see, one indisputable fact is that the film was shot on Kodachrome, which is expensive to develop due to the chemicals involved. Well, Al Diatley would have been able to afford that. He was a millionaire. He still is. As a result, only a few labs existed which developed Kodachrome, and it had to be done through Kodak. There were only a handful of labs which served millions in high population centers. Rogers' film would have went to Palo Alto, not Yakima, and even then on a Friday night after seeing The Creature. This would mean that the story told by Patterson and Gimlin that the film was rushed to Yakima, developed Saturday, and shown Sunday the 22nd is an impossible scenario, because not only did the Palo Alto lab not work on weekends, but there were not any Kodak labs that worked on weekends. Not at all, not ever. Well, how do we know that Al Diatley didn't know somebody at the lab in Seattle? If you need further proof as to the creative prowess of John Chambers, please read my article about how he hoaxed the Minnesota Iceman, which happened at the same time. Once you look at that, your questions will be answered. It makes everything said here just fall into place. Well, again, this is all theory, this is all conjecture, this is all hearsay. Every single bit of this. There's no substantiation to it whatsoever. So there are 2 more parts coming to this, folks. I'm not done yet. I'll see you guys later. Y'all be good or be good at it.